Welcome to the RSP Boiler Room. I'm Matt Waldman with the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. Today we're going to take an extended look at Leonard Fournette. And Fournette's developed into somewhat of a polarizing player in the draft community. You know, he burst on the scene as a high school student who was considered one of the best backs in the past 10 years, according to a guy like Tom Luganbill, I believe. Or it was maybe Lemming, who does the work at ESPN, who talked about him in that regard. I don't know which, but I know that ESPN, especially their draft guys, have been really talking Fournette up for years now, and he's even been compared to Adrian Peterson, you know, in terms of his skill set. I reject that outright, but it doesn't mean that I think that Leonard Fournette is a bad back. In fact, I think he can be a very good NFL back. In fact, he can be a monstrous back if put in the right system. The problem is what is that right system, and how do we determine those things? Because that's where it gets polarizing. I think a lot of draftniks may look at him and say there are certain things he cannot do well, or he doesn't do as well, and then there will be people who will argue, yes, he can do those things well. And it just creates a massive confusion about what Leonard Fournette is and how good he is. I'm going to attempt to straighten that out a little bit, and I think the best game so far to date that reveals what Leonard Fournette is and what he isn't is this Wisconsin matchup at the beginning of 2016. So we're going to get started. We're going to look at, several of the plays from this game, and I think as it goes, you're going to see what I mean about what he does well and what he needs to really be the kind of back that people hype him to be. And the way that we're going to begin this is we're going to look really at the flow of this game. The first half of this game actually spends more time revealing what Fournette isn't and where he can struggle. And then the second half shows a little bit better what he does best. This first play is a great example. We're going to see a toss play that's going to work to the left side, and you're going to get some penetration at the line of scrimmage that's going to force Fournette to make a cut back very close to the line. And when Fournette has to cut close to the line, that's where he struggles a little bit more than he would otherwise. And we're going to watch it one full time here. Toss play, cuts back inside, dives forward, gets 3 yards. Okay, doesn't seem like too bad of a play, but let's watch it in slow motion. And what I want you to notice is when he changes direction. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It's what he's doing based on the penetration in this play. The line's getting stood up and moved back a little bit to the inside on the left. There's some good penetration against the fullback, and that forces the fullback to have to address a block close to the backfield. And when that happens, watch where Fournette has to make this decision right here. He's about a yard away from his nearest blocker. He has to take a couple of small steps. There's not much of a crease. He has to change direction at a fairly radical angle because he looks like he's really heading outside. And when he sees the safety screaming downhill, he sees the penetration that is forcing the blocker to make his block behind the line of scrimmage. He has to make 2 small steps and then just leap forward. I think this is good vision. I think it's a good decision, but it's also one where he couldn't do it while keeping his balance. And you're going to see this a lot with Fournette, where when he has to make these quick adjustments at the line of scrimmage, he's not going to be one that's going to really get through a lot on a consistent basis with his feet under him in this way. Now, this isn't to say that Fournette has bad change of direction. He just has a more limited scope with how he changes direction well. It's a subtle difference, but it is important to note that fact and to consider it. Here's a downhill run that's going to go, off tackle or really outside, more of an outside zone looking play, but the penetration outside the fullback forces him to turn. Now you can see he turns the hips pretty well. Right here, he turns the hips well enough to avoid that hit. He's got decent feet in that regard. but you're not going to see him make a lot of great jump cuts or make any hard planting cuts here. So this is more of in line with what he was doing. He's not going against the grain here, and when he can change direction with the grain and just kind of lift his feet up a little bit, he does fine. Where Fournette thrives is when you give him a runway. And what I mean by a runway is you allow him to get downhill and allow him to make his changes of direction earlier, like really right after the exchange point, so that he can set his course before he hits the crease, and doing it within, I would say, at least 3 to 4 steps before he hits that crease. And you're going to see that here as a good example. See that little stutter step? That stutter step right there, that allows him to get downhill. Right there, that little stutter step. He bends it down. He's still got a good runway to power through. And you can see he gets himself, about 6 yards on this play. And a lot of that is, again, the runway, because he's going at full speed. He's a big guy. He loves to be able to make contact at full speed and punish defenders, and that's what makes him really a great college back, and what he could make him a really good pro back in an offense that allows him to take a pitch, make his little adjustment, get right downhill, and just say, I dare you to hit me high. Nobody's going to want to hit Leonard Fournette high on occasion, on a regular basis, because this guy is a sledgehammer in that regard, and he will wear you out if you let him do this enough times. And we're going to see more of that. But before we do, we're going to see where, again, he struggles a little bit, and that's on plays where there's penetration into the backfield and where he's forced to have to make an adjustment within a yard or two of a defender. When he's forced to change off course, he gets tripped up. And we're going to see a better view of this. And to me, this tells you a ton about Fournette and why he's not Adrian Peterson, okay? He's not Adrian Peterson. He's not Matt Forte. He's not a lot of backs that have that 225, 235 pound weight, but at the same time can cut really well. Fournette can make certain changes of direction, but what he cannot do very well is make that hard lateral cut that's going to be really wide. He just doesn't have the hips for it, if you ask me. He has to, if he does it, it's a very exaggerated leap or jump, and it's not as in control as what you'd see, say, Joe Mixon do. But you see that little cut, it gets him to bend outside, but the problem is he still gets clipped at the foot and falls forward. And this is the kind of thing that really, when you look at his game, he doesn't have that kind of flexibility in the hips to make wide lateral cuts and plant hard and cut outside as consistently or as widely as some of the top backs in the league. And that's what makes good zone runners. That's why Devonta Freeman, when you watch him and he can make these dramatic cuts, or Adrian Peterson, who can make the same cuts as Freeman but is in a 235 pound frame, or 225, 230 pound frame. When you see that, that's what makes him so dangerous on zone plays, or on plays that you can also run him from a variety of sets. But he needs more of that downhill angle, and he needs to be able to set his course earlier as opposed to making changes here. When this happens, he's going to have problems. And because teams know that what they need to do is get penetration against him, and he's not great at changing direction, what Fournette does, to his credit, is he gets downhill and tries to just get the most he can in front of him. But on short yardage plays, when there's penetration like this, he's not always going to get the yardage you need, because he doesn't have that footwork to step and slide as well all the time. So again, limited play here where he's, the penetration is very good here. He's got to change his course 2 to 3 yards behind the defender, really even a yard, and just couldn't get it. Once again, you're not going to want him cutting back. Look at this cutback attempt. Cuts downhill, We're going to see this defender come down here and watch the spin. It's not much of a spin, to be honest with you. It's a spin in place. He's still wrapped at the leg. Can't get free. Yes, he can make spin moves. Yes, he can hurdle people. Yes, he can jump. Yes, he can cut. But he doesn't do it with the dynamic range that you're looking for here. Even this, you see a guy like Joe Mixon, again, Dalvin Cook, sharper cut downhill. He has to make two on this play to even get within that range. And then that spin in place doesn't no good. Another note I want to make about Fournette is his blocking. This is a guy that has a lot of potential to be a good blocker in the NFL, who can block really all three levels of the defense with some level of capability. He loves to punish people, though, just the same way he loves to punish people in the open field as a runner. He loves to punish people with his pads rather than getting square and striking with his hands. Now, he can strike with his hands, and I've seen him get square and do so, but he needs to do it with greater regularity. Here, we're going to watch him lower his shoulder and lead with that inside shoulder. Now, it generates some force against the defensive end coming inside the guard, and he's able to stop him enough, but he does get shoved back, about 3 steps. Why does that happen? Because again, he's delivered a nice strike, but instead of delivering the strike, if he delivers his hands, he can strike with his hands and steer the defender outside. And if he does that, he's not at risk of being pushed into the backfield or into the quarterback. And that's what he needs to learn here. If he can do that, he's going to be so valuable to teams in pass protection with his size, his quickness, his desire to mix it up. It's great work. And you got to like that even at the end of the half, the effort here by Fournette to tackle the defender. This is a guy who's a football player. But we also see that, once again, changing direction. You don't want Fournette from spread. This is not his ideal spot because he's not great east-west as a runner. Now, he's going to make some plays if they're well blocked. But in the NFL, a lot of plays aren't well blocked that you're expected to get yards on anyhow. And when you're when you look at this and you have a defender getting penetration across the guard here and forcing Fournette to bend away and go east-west, he's going to be able to run Fournette down. Let's watch it one more time. See 57 here? Watch him go down the line, force Fournette to avoid this double team he was hoping to access, and run him down. Get a big back move in east-west, and they're much easier to tackle, and that's the case with Fournette too. Here's another example where he gets a decent gain here, but it's not something that I would say is ideal. You're looking at him in the pistol once again, working downhill, trying to cut downhill late in the run, about a yard from the line of scrimmage. Again, not where you want him cutting. You want him cutting and setting his sights 3 to 4 or 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage, trying to make a spin move. Gets enough of it, but he's still wrapped. Gains about 4. But you should begin to see what I'm talking about here, that in the NFL, he's probably not going to get creases that big on a consistent basis. You don't want, if you can get him to make these cuts a little bit earlier with I formation types of runs, single back sets where he's deep in the backfield, you're going to get a little bit more out of him if you have the right blocking scheme or good blockers who can execute that scheme. He could be a monster for it, and we're going to see examples of that coming up fairly soon. But before we do, let's take a look at him also in the other vital facet of the passing game, which is him as a receiver. He has always been an excellent receiver. That's one of the things that has made him such a good prospect. Here's this wide route, pressure coming off the left side. He makes the adjustment, cuts in front of his defender, that outside linebacker, and does a really nice job of getting in front of his face, turning to make a good target for the quarterback, leaping to make the catch in traffic. And while it's only, a 4-yard gain on 3rd and 6, what you're seeing here is good hands, good concentration, tucking the ball quickly and turning into a runner even though he gets wrapped. Now we're back to looking at Fournette doing what he does best, which is just getting downhill. You got about 8 in the box here. See where he made that step? I'm going to watch it one more time. Right there was that downhill cut. It was several yards behind the line of scrimmage. See that little step. See if we can look at it a little slower for us. Right about here. See those 2 little stutter steps? He does that about 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage. That sets his course to go through here. And when he gets downhill, again, you get wrapped even 2 yards downfield, he's still going to get you 6. That's one of the nice things about him when you let him get downhill. And when I was talking about Fournette having good feet and good agility, but it's limited in scope, this is an example of good agility for Fournette, which is cutting his stride length and bouncing it outside. He can do that very well. You're going to watch this coming up here on this play downhill of the guard. He sees the penetration. He cuts the stride. Let's see if we can do it one more time. The tape jumped a little bit. Watch him cut the stride very close to the hole. Right there. Bounce it outside. Get downhill. And then just lower the boom on the safety. We're going to get another view of it here. Watch him cut that stride right there. He had room to do it and then just run over that safety. And that's the thing. That's about the extent of his scope. If penetration is there and forces him to make a jump cut or a hard lateral cut, it's going to be difficult for him. But to be able to slide, pick and slide a little bit, cut his stride length a little bit and turn his hips, that's fine. Just not that wide, hard lateral cut. Here we go again. He sees everything he needs to see, and you can understand that's the case by watching how he uses his feet. Again, you're going to watch little stutter steps. 2 right there, another 2 right there, and he dips into the crease. Watch it slowly. Right there, right there. That's good footwork. And he has no hesitation really about getting downhill. What he's hesitating for is, okay, I'm reading the blocks. Now I'm going to work back to the inside of my fullback and then get downhill of him. Those are the things he was seeing ahead of time. He was anticipating all this, and the footwork showed that. It's just that he's not a guy, he needs that room to be able to make these little steps as opposed to jump cutting like Le'Veon Bell can, or Adrian Peterson for that matter. This is about the extent of a lateral cut for Fournette that actually works out reasonably well, and some people wouldn't even call it a lateral cut, but you're going to see it here. Little plant there, dip back outside, and he can get his knees high and hurdle, and then he can run over you, and we're going to see it from another point of view. See what I'm saying? Again, good feet. Just doesn't have the hips. It's in the hips to be able to make those types of hard cuts. In the hips and the bend of the knees and the hips together and be able to get those legs wide. just doesn't have that kind of style. But we're going to see more of Fournette as a receiver, and there are a lot of good receiving backs in this draft class. Fournette is certainly near the top. And that's what's impressive about him, because he's such a banger. But watch him run this little out and up wheel route. And he takes a hit on this as well, which is what I like. Catching it over your back shoulder, securing the ball, taking the hit and getting chopped and coming down with it. It's a nice play. Now we're talking about him downhill. Let's see. No, we don't have that one yet. We'll look at another one in a moment. This is another example of him cutting downhill early. You see the little stutter step right after the exchange and then dipping downhill. Big runway. Sets his course right here, down the runway. Powers through, gets himself about 7 yards. Here's an example of what I think he can become as a blocker. He can become even better than this. But you can see him picking up a blitz. First he picks up the inside release by the defender on the edge. Gives a little bit of a push and punch. Now he drops his pads once again. But you're going to see the makings of what can be good technique. And I know a lot of people say, look, as long as he's willing, he'll get better. Yes and no. I'd like to see willing and technique like that. See where he got his hands in there and he gave an uppercut punch? See where he rolls his hips into doing it? He stands up that edge defender that way. That's what you want to see. Sometimes it takes backs a couple years. Sometimes they don't ever do it. And then you're wondering why they never get on the field. Fournette shows that he can do this. This is going to be promising for him if he can be more consistent about it. And then he peels off and picks up the blitz. So Fournette as a blocker, I can see areas where you can get better, and there's certainly things on this tape that I haven't shown you that would give you good illustration of why he can get better. But when he does square, he can deliver a punch and give him a little more opportunity to control or to slide off and help out elsewhere. This gives him a fighting chance to get on a field early if he's in the right type of scheme. Here's another good play for Fournette with a runway. Downhill, see how he's got 1, 2, 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage and really 4 yards before he's going to run into a defender most likely to change direction here. He reads the penetration very well. He takes those 2 little steps and it gives him a chance to bounce it outside. Again, many backs who we've talked about compared to him would be able to jump cut this or make a hard plan cut. He has to make a couple of steps and do that. Does that make him a bad back? Absolutely not. It just means that he's a back who needs a runway. And when he does, you're going to see some good stuff out of him. See if they show from the other angle. See what I'm saying? It wasn't that Le'Veon Bell, Matt Forte, hard plant and cut. It's about 3 or 4 steps he had to take there. Just knowing what he is and what he can and can't do makes a big difference for what kind of team is going to pick him. It's going to be a team that I think would be best running him from an eye or a single set. Again, is that cut and change of direction he made close to the line of scrimmage? Absolutely not. 1. Yep. Second cut. 2 cuts. 1, 2, downhill, gets 3 yards. But still, it was a type of a run where he gets what's needed there. He sees the crease as well. It's just a matter of being able to exploit them within the realms of his ability. See, even on that route, is that really a hard jump cut? He's not a guy who's that nimble side to side. Here's a great example of him running from a pistol where he does make a last second move, but you can see that the scope of the move isn't very wide. It's just one gap over. Let him do this, or give him the opportunity to do this, and he's fine. And it's also a nice show of vision. Again, he's decisive. He sees the small creases. You can see it right here. It's downhill, dips inside his blocker, and gets about 18 yards on the play. And we're going to watch it from this point of view, because he's going to work downhill. He sees this linebacker coming up. He's got this offensive lineman blocking him to the outside, and he sets it up and then dips it right back in, and it's a small crease. I mean, he's confident through those small creases. But it's not much of a cut either. You're not asking him to cut from right guard to left tackle. You're asking him to cut from the outside shoulder of his blocker to the inside shoulder. You ask him to do that and let him stay downhill, and he's going to punish people. He's going to pick up yards fast, and he's going to wear people out. I like Leonard Fournette. I like him a lot, but you have to know what he is. You have to know really what to expect from him, and I think that, you know, for anyone who expects him to run from a pistol set, it's going to have to be one format in a way that gives him a longer runway. And, you know, so we're going to have to start looking at offenses that give him that opportunity to make decisions 3 to 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage and not 1 to 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And if he can do that consistently in whatever offense that he's in, he's going to be successful. Thanks again for watching. For more RSP Boiler Room videos, you can check out my YouTube channel at the RSP Film Room, and you can check out my blog at www.mattwaldmanrsp.com.